If you've ever spent time trying to craft a complex prompt using OpenAI or any of the other large language models, you realize that the more complex the prompt gets, the more difficult it gets to get reliable results and stop the model from hallucinating and giving you values that you weren't really expecting. What we want to do really is break that down into smaller prompts, a series of small reliable prompts that we can use to achieve a little piece of each of the problem with logic between them that lets us make decisions on what prompt we should do next. And indeed, that's the basis of Agentic AI. And now within MIStudio, we can drag and drop this whole Agentic AI system where we add prompts to the screen and connect those together with data from real devices or databases or anywhere similar, and make decisions based on the output of those prompts to decide what we should do next as a part of either a display or another prompt. So here I have a small simulation of it's a municipal lift station. If you don't know what a lift station is, it moves sewage from a low point to a high point. So if the sewage is being delivered below the level of the treatment statement, it would pump that sewage up. And so we have some simple values that represent that: a discharge pressure, a flow rate, there's a motor current, various other things. One of the powerful things about MIStudio is we can set the names of inputs and the number of inputs on any component so that we can then act on those. And so this is converting to a JSON output. Large language models really like JSON, and so by just feeding all these values into this model, I can get a JSON string out that I can feed into my large language model. I'm going to use that same capability in my large language model prompt here. This is just a simple prompt box that's going to let me send a prompt to OpenAI. But I want to use data that I've got in my screen. So what I want to use is some input data. And so I'm going to create some imports on this. And what I'm inputting is the value here that I get from the current values. And I want to compare that to historical values that I've read from my golden batch in a database, the values that I would expect based on the condition the lift station currently. Similarly, I want to have some outputs on this. So I want to know what's in spec, what's out of spec, what's out of spec low, what's out of spec high. And so I'll add some outputs. So I've got the low and the high out of specs. I've got a description of why it believes that those are out of specs and some statistics. And so I get those into my model. So I'm feeding in the current values and the historical values for comparison. And I'm going to get out what the model thinks is in and out of spec. So what we need is a prompt to interact with those. And so we'll add a prompt. And this lets me interact with the values that I'm inputting to the system. Here's the historical values, and it's simply just put them in a double curly bracket, and they'll be substituted when the prompt is run. And the same thing with the current values. For the output, we have the double square values. So I'm asking it to put the outputs of the values it considers low in the output low, and the output high, and the description, and so on. It's all simple enough to do. We just have some special substitutions in here, but that allows us to interact with the values that are in the application. And so with my prompt, I need to do something with those outputs. So I've got the values that are out of spec low. I'll feed those into the low out of spec. I've got values that are out of spec high. We'll feed those into the high output. I have a description of status, which I am not currently going to do anything with. But now when I push the button to trigger a problem report, I'll get some values into these high and low outputs telling me what the system considers is wrong with my lift station. But I want to do something with those, and I could feed those into another prompt. I could feed those into a script. I could feed those into some other logic that's built on the screen. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to feed it into a knowledge base. So here we have another block that is, again, a large language model block. But what this is going to do is it's going to look in a particular folder and find the files in that knowledge base and determine if it can find, based on what inputs are low and what inputs are high, if it can find a suggested remediation for that situation. And again, these were added as import names and output names, and the prompt references those names. It's a simple prompt that says, hey, I have this problem, and I would like you to tell me what to do about that. And I get the recommendation out through here, and that will end up in my display on the screen. Now I can easily test this within the environment. I pull up the test frame. If I trigger a problem report, we'll see that it makes some suggestions as to what might be the issues here. It says that the discharge rate and the flow rate are low. And so then we can simply say, well, tell me what I should be doing to troubleshoot that problem. And it comes back with those as a suggestion.